The chamber was silent as Captain Tae-Rin walked to the center podium. Around him, representatives from 53 alien species watched from their elevated seats. Some looked uncomfortable. Most looked satisfied. A few even smiled. Tae-Rin carried no notes. He wore his formal uniform, crisp and clean, with Earth's symbol on his shoulder. Behind him stood Ambassador Hana Kwan, her face calm despite what was coming. They both knew this day would arrive eventually. The Velcrin Chancellor stood first, his tall frame casting shadows across the marble floor. His voice echoed through the chamber with practiced authority. The motion has been decided. By a vote of 41 to 12, this council expels humanity from all territories, stations, and agreements under our jurisdiction. You have 90 days to withdraw completely. Murmurs of approval rippled through the assembly. The Thros delegation actually applauded. Tae-Rin simply nodded. "May I speak?" he asked. The Chancellor looked annoyed but gestured forward. "You have 5 minutes." Tae-Rin looked up at the assembled aliens, species that humans had worked beside for 200 years, species they had healed, traded with, defended, and called friends. "We accept your decision," he said simply. His voice was steady and quiet. "We will leave peacefully. All human personnel will withdraw within your timeline. We will take only what belongs to us, by law." He paused, letting his words settle. "But I want you to understand something. We did not come to your worlds seeking power. We came seeking partnership. When plague struck Velcrin Prime 30 years ago, our doctors worked for 8 months, without rest, to find a cure. We asked for nothing in return. When the Thros trade routes collapsed, our engineers rebuilt them. We charged nothing. When pirates threatened the outer colonies, our ships patrolled in silence. We never demanded recognition. The chamber grew quieter. Some aliens shifted in their seats. "You call us aggressive. You say we meddle. Perhaps you are right. But we meddle because we care. We intervene because we see suffering and cannot look away. If that makes us unwelcome, then we will go. But remember this conversation when you wonder who will answer the next crisis." Tae-Rin bowed slightly, a gesture of respect he did not owe them. "We leave in peace. We wish you well." He turned and walked out. Hana followed. Behind them, the council erupted in debate, but neither looked back. In the human quarters of Nexus Prime Station, the mood was grim but professional. Dr. Sung Park stood in the medical bay, reviewing patient transfers. He had worked here for 15 years, training doctors from a dozen different species. Now he was packing equipment and closing files. "Will they be ready?" asked Yuna Choi, the chief engineer. She stood in the doorway with a data pad, her expression worried. "No," Sung said honestly. "Half these doctors only graduated because we created simplified training programs. The Velcrin have excellent surgeons, but terrible diagnostics. The Thros understand medicine but panic under pressure. Without our staff to coordinate, this hospital will struggle. Should we warn them?" Sung shook his head. "We did. Multiple times. They believe they know better." He sealed another crate. "We can only control what we do, not what they learn from it." Across the station, human personnel began the great withdrawal. In engineering sections, power management centers, water treatment facilities, and atmospheric control rooms, human workers logged out of systems they had maintained for decades. They left instruction manuals, detailed documentation, and emergency protocols. Everything by the book. But books could not replace experience. Yuna discovered this when reviewing the station's primary power grid. Her team had been making small adjustments for years, tiny corrections that prevented cascading failures. Nothing dramatic, nothing anyone noticed. Just the quiet, constant work that kept complex systems running smoothly. "Did we document all of this?" she asked her assistant. "Most of it. But some adjustments were instinctive. You know, the kind of thing you learn from doing it 1,000 times." Yuna felt a weight in her chest. Leave detailed notes anyway. Everything you can remember. They will need it. Down in the Trade Coordination Center, hundreds of human workers processed the endless flow of interspecies commerce. They handled disputes over shipping routes, managed currency exchanges, and maintained the neutral databases that allowed rivals to trade without conflict. Commander Jin Lee walked through the center, watching his people work. Quiet, efficient, mostly invisible to the Greater Council. Yet they handled trillions of credits in transactions every day. "Sir, what happens to all this when we leave?" a young officer asked. Jin considered the question. "The Council thinks other species will step in. They believe commerce will continue, naturally. Will it? No. Commerce requires trust. We were trusted because we had no stake in their rivalries. We treated the Velkrin and Thros equally, even when they hated each other. Who will do that when we are gone?" The officer looked troubled. "Should not we tell them?" "We did. They did not listen." As days turned to weeks, the withdrawal continued. Human ships arrived in steady streams, loading personnel and equipment. Colonies that humans had built were handed over to local authorities. Research stations transferred their data. Military outposts powered down their defense grids. Everywhere, the pattern repeated. Humans left cleanly, professionally, and completely. Hana spent her final days reviewing documents that would never be read. Reports on conflicts they had quietly resolved. Lists of diseases they had cured and released as open-source treatments. Logs of patrol routes that had kept shipping lanes safe. Maintenance schedules for infrastructure they had built and maintained without asking for payment. 200 years of quiet work, invisible to those who benefited most. On the 89th day, Tae Rin stood on the bridge of the transport ship, Morning Light. Behind him, through the viewport, Nexus Prime Station gleamed against the stars. It looked peaceful, prosperous, strong. He knew better. The communications officer approached. "Sir, we are receiving requests from several council members. They want to negotiate an extension, possibly reverse the expulsion." "Who?" "Minor members. The ones who voted against expulsion. They are worried." Tae Rin shook his head. "Tell them we appreciate their concern. But the council has spoken. We respect their decision, even though it is wrong, especially because it is wrong. We leave them their dignity. They will need it in the coming months." The last human ship departed Council space at exactly midnight, Council Standard Time. 90 days, as promised. Not a minute longer. Behind them, aliens celebrated their independence. They threw parties, made speeches about freedom from human interference. The Velkrin Chancellor declared it a new age of self-determination. In the quiet of his ship, Tae Rin wrote a final log entry. "We came as friends. We worked as partners. We left as ghosts. History will judge whether we were expelled or released. I suspect the Council will have their answer soon enough. Not from anything we do, but from everything we no longer do." He closed the file and looked toward the unknown space ahead. Humanity's exile had begun. The real test was just starting. But it would not be humans who faced it. 3 months after the last human ship departed, the Velkrin engineer Thonrak noticed the first problem. It was small, almost trivial. A water purification plant on Velkrin Prime processed 15% less efficiently than normal. Not enough to cause immediate concern, but enough to appear in the daily reports. He checked the maintenance logs. Everything looked normal. The previous human supervisor, someone named Yuna, had left detailed instructions. Thonrak followed them exactly. The efficiency did not improve. "Strange," he muttered, adjusting the plasma filters again. "The procedure says this should work." What he did not know was that Yuna had spent 7 years learning the quirks of this particular plant. She knew that filter array 3 always ran hot and needed different calibration than the manual suggested. She knew that the pressure sensors in Section 12 were slightly miscalibrated from the factory and had to be read with that in mind. She knew 100 small details that made the difference between adequate and excellent performance. She had never written them down because she did not think of them as special knowledge. They were just the things you learned from doing the job every day. Across Council space, similar problems emerged like cracks in old glass. On Thros Station 7, the hospital emergency room waited 3 hours for laboratory results that used to take 30 minutes. The Thros doctor in charge, Kelva, remembered that human lab technicians had always been faster. She had assumed they used better equipment. The equipment was the same. What changed was the absence of Dr. Sung's training system. He had taught his technicians to prepare common tests in advance during slow periods, maintaining a ready stock for emergencies. He had created priority codes that everyone understood intuitively. He had built a culture of anticipation rather than reaction. The manual he left behind explained none of this. It simply listed procedures. On the 3rd week, a patient died because test results came too late. It was the first death, but it would not be the last. Commander Jin Lee's absence became apparent in the trade sectors. For years, he had maintained a vast, informal network of contacts across every major trading species. When disputes arose, a quick message to Jin often resolved them before they became official problems. He knew who could be flexible and who needed face-saving compromises. He understood cultural nuances that prevented agreements from collapsing over misunderstandings. The new Thros trade coordinator, Ventar, had no such network. When a shipping dispute arose between Velkrin and Hylar merchants, he followed official protocols. The protocols required formal arbitration, which took weeks. By then, both sides had hardened their positions. The trade route shut down. Billions in commerce stopped flowing. Ventar checked the records. In the past, Commander Jin had handled a similar dispute in 3 days. How? The records showed only the final agreement. They did not show the 20 conversations Jin had with various contacts, building consensus before formal talks began. They did not show the personal relationships that made compromise possible. Dr. Mina Seo had specialized in xenobiology, particularly in cross-species disease transmission. Before leaving, she had uploaded her entire research database to the Council Medical Archives. Thousands of documents, carefully organized and labeled. What she could not upload was her instinct. Developed over 2 decades of fieldwork. When a new virus appeared on 3 different worlds simultaneously, the Council doctors consulted her database. They followed her protocols exactly. The virus spread. Anyway, Mina would have noticed that this virus had a dormancy period in zero-gravity environments. She had seen something similar 12 years ago and had written a paper about it. But that paper was buried in the database among 10,000 others, and no one thought to search for it until 6,000 people had died. Pilot Hyun Baek had commanded the human patrol fleet in the Outer Reach sector. His ships ran regular routes through space that officially had no strategic value. Pirates occasionally appeared there, but rarely succeeded in attacks. The Council had assumed this was because the sector was simply not worth raiding. 4 months after Hyun withdrew his fleet, pirate attacks in the sector increased by 400%. Merchant ships that had traveled safely for years suddenly found themselves boarded and looted. The Velkrin military investigated and discovered that human patrol ships had been running constant, unpredictable sweeps through the area for 15 years. The pirates had known about the patrols. The Council had not. When questioned, the human military liaison simply stated that the patrols were routine security operations. They had submitted reports monthly. No one had read them. No one had realized that routine security operations meant preventing dozens of attacks that would have otherwise occurred. The Council military reviewed Hyun's old reports. No incidents. What they did not say was that no incidents meant the patrol had intercepted 3 pirate scouting parties and chased them off before they could identify targets. Hyun's fleet had been a silent guardian that no one appreciated until it was gone. The Nexus Prime Station, the heart of Council government, began experiencing cascading system failures. First, the environmental controls in Section 12 started fluctuating. Then power distribution in the eastern quarter became unreliable. Then the waste recycling system backed up, creating a sanitation crisis in residential areas. Each problem was small. Each had a solution in the human-created maintenance database. But solving one problem revealed three more. The station was complex beyond anything the council engineers had fully appreciated. Yuna Choi's team had maintained Nexus Prime for decades. They had not built it, but they had learned its personality. They knew which systems interacted in unexpected ways. They knew that fixing the environmental controls in Section 12 required adjusting the power flow in Section 9, even though the manual showed no connection between them. They knew the station like humans know their own homes. The new maintenance teams followed the manuals exactly. The problems worsened. The Velcrin Chancellor received a report that made his blood run cold. It was a simple document, sealed and left by Captain Tae Rin before his departure. The Chancellor had not opened it, assuming it was another futile protest. Now, with problems mounting, he broke the seal. Inside was a list. It contained every system that human personnel had maintained, every conflict they had mediated, every disease they had cured, every trade route they had balanced, every patrol they had run. Hundreds of items, each with dates and brief descriptions. At the bottom, Tae Rin had written a single sentence. "We did not seek credit for this work, but we thought you should know it existed." The Chancellor read through the list 3 times. Each entry was verified against council records. Everything checked out. All of it had been real. All of it had been invisible. On Velcrin Prime, power grid failures left entire cities in darkness for hours. The grid had been designed by Velcrin engineers 40 years ago. Human technicians had been maintaining it ever since, making small adjustments that prevented cascade failures. Those adjustments had never been documented because they seemed too minor to mention. Without them, the grid failed exactly as the original designers had feared it would. In the council chambers, arguments erupted daily. The Thros blamed the Velcrin for poor planning. The Velcrin blamed the Hylar for not stepping up. The Hylar blamed everyone for depending too much on humans in the first place. No one wanted to admit the real problem. They had not depended on humans. They had taken humans for granted. There was a difference. Minister Cora of the Thros Collective stood before the council, her voice full of defiance. "These are temporary difficulties. We will adapt. We will rebuild. We do not need humans to function." A minor delegate from the pre-species stood up. "Then why is everything falling apart? These are unrelated coincidences, are they? The hospital delays? The trade disputes? The pirate attacks? The infrastructure failures? All coincidences?" Cora had no good answer. That night, she reviewed records from her own hospital. Before humans left, average patient recovery time was 12 days. Now it was 19 days. Mortality rates had increased by 3%. Infection rates had doubled. The numbers did not lie. Across council space, the pattern repeated. Systems that had run smoothly for decades now stuttered and failed. Not because of sabotage. Not because humans had built them poorly, but because humans had been the invisible support structure that kept everything working. They had been the technicians who understood machines beyond what manuals could teach. They had been the mediators who prevented conflicts before they erupted. They had been the doctors who anticipated problems rather than just treating symptoms. They had been the traders who built trust across species lines. They had been the guards who protected without seeking glory. They had been the glue holding a fragile civilization together. And now they were gone. In distant space, on a human colony ship heading toward unexplored territory, Captain Tae Rin received reports of the Council's growing troubles. His officers wanted to know if they should respond to the distress signals beginning to trickle out. "No," Tae Rin said quietly. "They chose this path. We must let them walk it. Even if people die, people will die either way. If we return now, they learn nothing. They must understand what they had before. They can appreciate what they lost." It was a hard decision. But Tayrin had learned long ago that sometimes the kindest thing you could do was let someone face the consequences of their choices. 6 months after the expulsion, the plague arrived on Velcrin Prime without warning. It started in the southern continent, in a city called Threnkal. The first patient presented with fever and respiratory distress. Within 3 days, she was dead. Within a week, 200 people showed the same symptoms. The Velcrin doctors recognized the disease immediately. It was red vein syndrome, a virulent illness that had last appeared 30 years ago. Back then, it had killed thousands before human doctors found the cure. That cure existed in the medical database. Everyone knew it was there. What they did not know was that the database was locked behind access protocols that Dr. Sung's team had designed. The protocols were meant to prevent unauthorized modifications to critical medical data. They had multiple layers of encryption and verification, all created by human programmers who understood security systems in ways that others did not. The Velcrin doctors had the database. They could see the cure existed. They simply could not access it. Frantic attempts to break the encryption began immediately. The best Velcrin programmers worked around the clock. The code was not impossible to crack, but it was complex and elegant. Each layer they broke revealed another. Time passed. People died. After 3 weeks, they finally accessed the cure. By then, 4,000 people were dead. By the time the cure was manufactured and distributed, the death toll reached 11,000. In the council chambers, Director Velthar reviewed the casualty reports with a sick feeling in his chest. He remembered Dr. Sung's testimony during the expulsion hearings. The human had warned that medical systems were deeply integrated and that separating them would take time and care. The council had given them 90 days. Sung had said it was not enough. They had not listened. Velthar pulled up another old file. It was Ambassador Hana Kwan's final speech to the council, delivered the day before humans departed. He had not watched it at the time. He watched it now. Hana's face appeared on the screen, calm and composed. Behind her, the Earth symbol glowed softly. "We do not seek credit for our work," she said. "We never have. We came to help, and we did help. We built systems, cured diseases, maintained infrastructure, and kept peace. Not because we wanted recognition, but because it needed to be done. We ask only that you remember one thing. Civilization is fragile. It requires constant care. When we leave, that care leaves with us. Not because we take it away, but because you told us to go. What happens next is your responsibility, not ours." The video ended. Velthar sat in silence. The economic situation worsened daily. Trade between species had dropped by 60%. The problem was not lack of goods or demand. The problem was trust, or rather, the lack of it. For decades, humans had served as neutral third parties in interspecies commerce. When a Velcrin merchant sold goods to a Thros buyer, a human company often handled the exchange. The human company verified the goods, held the payment in escrow, and ensured both parties fulfilled their obligations. Everyone trusted humans, because humans had no stake in Velcrin-Thros rivalries. With humans gone, who could fill that role? The Velcrin did not trust Thros intermediaries. The Thros did not trust Velcrin ones. Neither trusted the Hylar, who had their own interests. Smaller species tried to step in, but they lacked the infrastructure and reputation that human companies had built over 2 centuries. Trade official Thex of the Hylar Confederacy spent weeks analyzing human commercial records, trying to understand how they had made it work. The records showed transactions, profits, and losses. What they did not show was the web of personal relationships that made commerce possible. Thex found something else in the records that shocked him. Human trading companies had operated at a loss on 40% of their routes. They had subsidized trade between species that hated each other, absorbing costs to keep goods flowing. They had done this deliberately. viewing it as investment in stability rather than profit. No one else was willing to do that. Without those subsidized routes, entire supply chains collapsed. Worlds that depended on imports found themselves short of food, medicine, and basic supplies. The pirate situation became a full crisis. The Outer Reach sector was now a lawless zone where merchant ships traveled at their own risk. Many simply stopped traveling there, cutting off colonies that depended on trade for survival. The Council military finally organized a response, sending patrol fleets to replace the human presence. But the military had dozens of sectors to cover and limited ships. They could not be everywhere at once. Pirates learned their schedules and simply avoided them. Pilot Hyun Baek's old patrol fleet had been able to cover the same area with one-third the ships because they had not run on schedules. They had used unpredictable patterns, sometimes staying in one area for days, sometimes sweeping through quickly. The pirates had never known where human ships would be, so they had simply avoided the entire sector. The Council military followed standard doctrine with predictable routes. It was efficient, but ineffective. Pirates adapted within weeks. On Nexus Prime Station, the infrastructure problems escalated from annoying to dangerous. The environmental system failures that had seemed minor now caused regular oxygen level drops in various sections. Power outages became daily occurrences. The water recycling system worked at 70% capacity, forcing rationing. Velcrin engineers brought in their best specialists. They studied the human maintenance manuals. They followed every instruction precisely. The problems continued. One engineer, a young female named Soratel, finally understood why. She was reviewing a power distribution schematic when she noticed something odd. The official design showed a straightforward system, but the actual installed system had dozens of small modifications. None were documented. None appeared in any manual. She investigated further and found that these modifications existed throughout the station. The humans had clearly made them, probably over many years, but had never recorded why. They were not errors or shortcuts. Each modification solved a specific problem or improved efficiency, but without knowing what problems they solved, removing them seemed dangerous. Leaving them without understanding them was equally dangerous. The station was a mystery that only its former caretakers could fully explain. Minister Cora of the Thros Collective refused to admit that expelling humans had been a mistake. When other council members suggested reaching out to humanity for help, she argued loudly against it. "We must solve these problems ourselves," she insisted. "If we run back to humans at the first sign of trouble, we prove that we needed them all along." "People are dying," a pre-delegate countered. "Is pride worth their lives? This is not about pride. This is about self-determination. We must learn to function without human interference." But privately, Cora had doubts. Her own son was a doctor in a Thros hospital. He had trained under Dr. Sung. She called him late one night. "How bad is it?" she asked. Her son was silent for a moment. "We are drowning, Mother. The humans trained us well, but they also made it look easy. We thought we understood medicine. We understand facts and procedures, but the humans understood systems. They saw how everything connected. They anticipated problems before they became critical. We are reactive. They were proactive. And people are dying because of the difference. What do you need? Honestly? We need them back. But since that is not going to happen, we need time. Years, probably. Time to learn what they knew. Time to make the mistakes they already made and learned from. Time that patients do not have. Cora ended the call, feeling hollow inside. War broke out between the Fen and Lurian species over resource rights in a contested system. It was a minor conflict by council standards, barely worth attention. But it was a conflict that would never have happened if humans were still present. Velthar discovered why when he reviewed historical records. The Fen and Lurian had disputed that system for 80 years. The dispute had never turned violent, because human mediators had been quietly managing it, not through official channels, but through informal conversations, trade incentives, and careful relationship building. A human diplomat named Tay Rin had been the primary mediator. Velthar found dozens of messages between Tay Rin and leaders from both species. The messages were friendly and casual, discussing everything from politics to family. Buried in that casual conversation was careful diplomacy that kept tensions from exploding. With Tay Rin gone, the informal network collapsed. Old grudges resurfaced. Within weeks of the first shots being fired, 3,000 people were dead. The council tried to mediate, but formal mediation required both sides to agree to talk. Neither side trusted the council. They had trusted Tay Rin because he had spent years building personal relationships with their leaders. The council could not replicate that overnight. Across council space, similar situations emerged. Conflicts that humans had quietly managed for years suddenly erupted. Some were small. Some threatened to destabilize entire regions. All of them had been invisible until the humans who managed them disappeared. Velthar spent a sleepless night reading through reports. The pattern was unmistakable. Humanity had been the connective tissue of council civilization. They had not ruled or dominated. They had simply been everywhere, doing the small, unglamorous work that kept everything functioning. He thought about Ambassador Hana's words. "We do not seek credit." Now he understood why. If you did important work and demanded recognition for it, people saw the recognition and not the work. But if you did important work and never mentioned it, people saw nothing at all. They assumed everything just naturally worked. Until it did not work anymore, Velthar made a decision. He began compiling a comprehensive report on the crisis. Every system failure, every death, every conflict, every economic collapse. He would present it to the full council. They needed to see the truth, no matter how painful. But even as he worked, he knew the truth would not be enough. Understanding what they had lost was one thing. Getting it back was something else entirely. In distant human space, Captain Tay Rin received his daily reports from observers monitoring council space. The news was grim. He read each report carefully, his expression never changing. His second officer, Commander G, stood nearby. "Should we send medical supplies? The plague on Velkrin Prime could be contained if they had our help." "They do not want our help," Tay Rin said quietly. "They want to do it themselves. But people are dying." "Yes. And that is the cost of pride. Both theirs and ours." Tay Rin set down the datapad. "If we rush in to save them, they learn nothing. They will resent us for proving they needed us. But if we stay away, if we let them face the consequences of their choice, perhaps they learn something more valuable than how to cure a plague. Perhaps they learn humility." That seems cruel. It is cruel. But sometimes, the kindest thing you can do is let someone struggle. Not because you enjoy their suffering, but because some lessons can only be learned the hard way. Tay Rin looked out at the stars. Somewhere out there, the council was learning those lessons. He hoped they learned before the cost became too high. 18 months after the expulsion, Nexus Prime Station began to die. The process was slow and inexorable, like a body shutting down organ by organ. First, the eastern residential quarter lost reliable power. Then the main water recycling system failed completely, forcing evacuation of 3 sectors. The medical bay experienced catastrophic equipment failures that killed 12 patients during routine surgeries. Director Velthar stood in the central command center, watching red warning lights multiply across the status board. Engineers worked frantically at every station, but they were fighting a losing battle. Every problem they fixed revealed 2 more. The station was unraveling. "How did we not see this?" asked Soratel, the young engineer who had been trying to decode the human modifications. She looked exhausted, having worked 30-hour shifts for the past week. We did not want to see it, Velthar replied. The humans built 90% of this station's core systems integration. We thought that meant we owned 90% of the station. We did not understand that integration itself was the real work. The humans did not just build systems. They made them talk to each other. Without that constant translation, everything falls apart. An alarm blared. Another section reported, life support failure. We need to evacuate, Soratel said. The station is not safe anymore. Velthar nodded slowly. The heart of the Galactic Council, the symbol of their united civilization, was being abandoned because no one could keep it running. The irony was bitter. On the agricultural world of Preen 4, starvation had begun. The world produced food for 7 other planets in its sector. But the transportation network had collapsed. Merchant ships refused to travel routes that were no longer protected from pirates. The food rotted in warehouses, while distant worlds went hungry. The Preen leadership begged the Council for help. The Council had no help to give. Their patrol fleets were stretched too thin. Their merchant marine was too small. The infrastructure that humans had maintained for decades could not be rebuilt in months. A Preen delegate named Vorma traveled to Thros space seeking aid. He found Minister Cora in her office, surrounded by reports detailing the growing crisis. We need food transport, Vorma said. Our surplus could feed millions, but it sits unused because no one will ship it. I understand your situation, Cora replied. But what can I do? The Thros Collective has the same problem. Our medical supplies cannot reach colonies that need them. Our trade routes are dying. Then we must contact the humans. Bring them back. Cora's expression hardened. Absolutely not. That would be admitting we cannot function without them. We cannot function without them. Vorma's voice rose in frustration. Look around you. The Council is collapsing. People are dying. Is your pride worth more than their lives? This is not about pride. If we crawl back to the humans now, we become dependent on them forever. We must learn to stand on our own. We are not standing. We are falling. And by the time we hit bottom, millions will be dead. Cora had no answer. Vorma left her office feeling hopeless. The economic depression deepened into something worse. It was not just trade that was failing. Entire planetary economies were collapsing as the interconnected systems that humans had maintained fell apart. Unemployment reached levels not seen in 300 years. Food shortages were common. Medicine was scarce. Basic infrastructure was crumbling. Trade official Thex had stopped trying to fix the economy. He was now focused on damage control, trying to prevent complete collapse. His analysis showed that the situation would get worse before it got better. Much worse. He prepared a presentation for the Council, showing economic projections for the next 5 years. The numbers were terrifying. If current trends continued, the Council would experience a total economic collapse within 3 years. Hundreds of billions would face poverty. Millions would die. At the bottom of his report, he added a single sentence. We could prevent this by requesting human assistance. The Council received his report in silence. No one wanted to be the first to suggest it. War had spread. The initial conflict between the Fen and Lurian species had drawn in their allies. 3 more species were now involved. Thousands died each week. Entire colonies were destroyed. The fighting showed no sign of stopping. The Council attempted mediation repeatedly. Every attempt failed. The combatants no longer trusted the Council to be neutral. They accused each other of having Council support. Every peace effort collapsed in accusations and recriminations. Velthar reviewed the diplomatic records from when humans had been present. He found that Captain Tayrin had mediated 17 separate conflicts during his time with the Council. 17 conflicts that never became wars because Tayrin had intervened early, quietly, and effectively. The records showed something else. Tayrin had never mediated through official Council channels. He had operated independently, building personal relationships with leaders, earning trust over years of consistent honesty. He had no authority except what people chose to give him. The council could not replicate that. They could send official mediators with full authority, but without trust, authority meant nothing. Dr. Kelva sat in her hospital office, reviewing mortality statistics. The numbers made her sick. Before humans left, her hospital had a mortality rate of 1.2%. Now it was 3.8%. More than 3 times as many patients were dying. It was not because the doctors were incompetent. It was because the entire medical system had been designed around human methodology. The diagnostic databases used human organizational systems. The training programs followed human pedagogy. The emergency protocols assumed human-level coordination. Without humans, everything was just slightly less efficient. Patients waited a bit longer for tests. Diagnoses took a bit more time. Treatment started a bit later. Each delay was small. Together, they killed people. Kelva had trained under Dr. Sung. She remembered his emphasis on anticipation. Do not wait for problems to appear, he had taught. Predict them. Prevent them. By the time symptoms are obvious, you are already behind. She tried to teach that same philosophy to her staff. But anticipation required experience and intuition that could not be learned from manuals. Her staff was competent, but they were reactive rather than proactive. By the time they recognized problems, patients were already in critical condition. She wrote a message to Dr. Sung, even though she knew she could not send it. Humans had withdrawn completely. They answered no messages from Council space, but she wrote it anyway. As a form of confession, you tried to warn us, she wrote. You said the integration was complex. You said 90 days was not enough time. We did not listen. We thought we understood medicine because we could perform procedures. We did not understand that medicine is more than procedures. It is systems thinking, pattern recognition, and constant vigilance. You made it look easy. We thought that meant it was easy. We were wrong. People are dying because of our arrogance. I am sorry. She saved the message in a file she would never open again. On the colony world of Tresh V's, the water system failed completely. The planet had been settled for 200 years and had a population of 20 million. Without water purification, the planet would be uninhabitable within weeks. Engineers worked desperately to repair the system. The equipment was old, but functional. The problem was more fundamental. The system had been designed by human engineers a century ago. It had been modified and updated dozens of times since then. Each modification had been carefully integrated into the overall system, but the documentation was incomplete. Human engineers had made many changes over the years without recording all the details. They had passed knowledge down through apprenticeship and hands-on training. The current engineers had manuals, but manuals could not capture a century of institutional knowledge. They tried to repair the system following the documentation. Each repair created new failures. The system was so integrated that fixing one component broke others in unpredictable ways. They were working blind, making educated guesses that were often wrong. Evacuation of Tresh V6 began. 20 million people needed to be relocated. The logistics were staggering. Where would they go? How would they get there? Who would take them? The council had no good answers. The refugee crisis would overwhelm dozens of worlds, and Tresh 6 was just one planet. If other systems failed similarly, tens of billions might need evacuation. Velthar's comprehensive report on the crisis was 300 pages long. He presented it to the full council in a session that lasted 8 hours. He detailed every failure, every death, every system that had collapsed without human maintenance. The evidence was overwhelming and undeniable. When he finished, the chamber was silent. No one could argue with the facts. The expulsion of humanity had been a catastrophic mistake. Finally, a small voice broke the silence. It was Ambassador He from the pre-species, one of the few who had voted against expulsion. "We must ask them to return," she said. "Not because we want to, but because we must. Pride is expensive. We cannot afford it anymore." Minister Cora stood up, her voice tight. "And what do we tell them? That we were wrong? That we need them? That we cannot function without them? Do you understand what that means? We lose everything. Our independence, our dignity, our self-respect. We have already lost those things," Velthar replied quietly. "We lost them the moment we expelled the people who held our civilization together. The question now is whether we lose anything else. Like millions more lives." The debate raged for hours. Some argued for pride. Some argued for pragmatism. Some simply sat in stunned silence, unable to process the magnitude of their mistake. In the end, the vote was called. Should the Council send a delegation to humanity, requesting their return? The vote was close, 31 to 22 in favor. It passed, but barely. Velthar was chosen to lead the delegation. As he prepared for the journey to human space, he felt no victory. Only shame, and the weight of billions, depending on his success. In human space, Captain Tay Rin received the message that a council delegation was requesting an audience. He was now Admiral Tay Rin, commanding humanity's defense fleet in their new territory. Humans had thrived in exile. They had colonized 15 new systems, established robust trade networks with non-council species, and advanced their technology significantly. They had not needed the council at all. Tay Rin called a meeting of human leadership. Ambassador Hana Kwan attended via holoconference from Earth. The question was simple. Should they receive the delegation? "They expelled us," Hana said. "They told us we were not welcome. Now they want us back because things are difficult. Should we reward that behavior? People are dying," replied Dr. Sung. "Whatever their leadership did, the civilians do not deserve to suffer." "If we return, what changes?" asked Engineer Yuna. "Do we become permanent servants, forever fixing their problems? Or do we demand something better?" Tay Rin listened to the debate. Finally, he spoke. "We will receive them. We will listen. But we will not make this easy." They chose to walk away from partnership. If they want partnership again, they must earn it. Not through begging, but through fundamental change. "We will not return as helpers. We return as equals. Or we do not return at all." The others agreed. A message was sent to the council delegation. They would be received in human space in 1 month. What happened after that would depend on what they were willing to offer, and more importantly, what they were willing to become. 3 years after the expulsion, Director Velthar's shuttle approached the human colony of New Sol. The contrast with council space was striking. The orbital stations gleamed with recent construction. Ships moved efficiently through well-organized traffic patterns. Everything spoke of a civilization that was thriving, not merely surviving. Velthar had brought a delegation of 5. Minister Cora represented the Thros, though she had fought against this mission until the end. Ambassador He of the pre-species came as well, along with military commander Kratos and economic minister Ventar. They were the leadership of a dying civilization, coming to plead for help. The human defense fleet escorted them to the main station. Velthar noticed the ships were new designs, sleek and advanced. Humanity had not been idle during their exile. They had grown stronger, while the council grew weaker. Admiral Tay Rin met them at the docking bay. He wore the uniform of Earth's defense forces, his expression neutral and professional. With him stood Ambassador Hana Kwan, older now but still carrying herself with quiet dignity. Several other humans accompanied them, including Dr. Sung, Engineer Yuna, and Commander Jin. "Director Velthar," Tay Rin said with a slight nod, "welcome to New Sol. I hope your journey was comfortable." "It was adequate," Velthar replied, trying to maintain some dignity. He noticed that Tay Rin had not offered any of the formal greetings usually exchanged between diplomatic parties. The message was clear. This was not a meeting of equals, at least not yet. They were led to a conference room with a view of the planet below. New Sol looked prosperous, its cities glowing in the night side, orbital elevators connecting surface to space. It was a world that knew peace and prosperity. Everything council space was not. Once seated, Velthar began his prepared speech. He had practiced it for weeks, trying to find words that acknowledged fault without appearing weak. But as he looked at the faces of the humans across the table, the rehearsed words felt hollow. He set aside his notes. "I will not waste your time with diplomatic language," he said. "We were wrong. The council was wrong to expel you. We did not understand what you did for us. We did not appreciate the work you performed, the conflicts you prevented, the systems you maintained. We took it all for granted. And when you left, everything fell apart." He paused, meeting Tayrin's eyes. "Council space is dying. Our economy has collapsed. Wars are spreading. Infrastructure is failing. Millions have died. Millions more will die. We need help. We need your help. I am here to ask if you will return." The room was silent for a long moment. Finally, Hana Kwan spoke, her voice gentle but firm. "You say you were wrong. But what did you learn from being wrong? If we return, what changes? Do we go back to doing all the invisible work while you take credit for stability? Do we maintain your systems while you resent us for being necessary? What exactly are you offering us?" Minister Cora bristled. "We are offering you the chance to help people who are suffering. Is that not enough?" "No," Hana replied simply. "We can help people who suffer in many ways. We do not need the council for that. The question is whether a relationship with the council benefits us. 3 years ago, you decided it did not benefit you. What has changed?" Velthar understood the challenge. They were not asking for apologies. They were asking for fundamental change in how the council operated. He glanced at his delegation. Cora looked angry. He looked hopeful. The others seemed uncertain. "What would you need?" Velthar asked. "What would make a partnership acceptable to humanity?" Tayrin pulled up a display. It showed a document titled Terms of Re-Engagement. He scrolled through it slowly so everyone could see. First, full voting rights on the council. Not observer status. Not junior membership. Full and equal participation in all decisions. "That is impossible," Cora interjected. "You are one species. We are 53. You cannot have equal say." "We do not want equal say," Tayrin replied. "We want equal rights. The same voting power as any other member species. No more, no less." Currently, the Council operates on population-weighted voting. That system favors large empires over quality of contribution. We propose contribution-weighted voting. Species that contribute more to Council stability, economy, and security get more influence. "That would give you enormous power," Kratos said. "Yes. Because we contribute enormously. If others contribute more, they will have more power. But you cannot benefit from our work while denying us influence over how that work is used." Hana continued scrolling. Second, public acknowledgement of humanity's historical contributions. We do not need monuments or awards, but the Council must publicly document what humans did during our 200 years of membership. The maintenance, the mediation, the innovation, all of it. Not to shame you, but so future generations understand what partnership actually means. Third, Dr. Sung added, independent human authority over critical systems. If we maintain your medical databases, we control access. If we manage your power grids, we set the protocols. No more situations where our work is taken for granted until something breaks. You trust us to do the work, or you do not use us at all. Ventar shook his head. Those terms are too harsh. You are asking us to surrender our independence. No, Engineer Yuna said quietly. We are asking you to acknowledge reality. You already surrendered your independence. You did it the moment you could not maintain your own systems. We are offering you a chance to regain that independence through partnership. Or you can continue alone and watch your civilization collapse. Minister Cora stood up, her face flushed with anger. This is extortion. You are leveraging our suffering for power. We are leveraging our value for respect, Hana corrected. For 200 years, humans worked within your system, accepting junior status, doing the unglamorous work, asking for nothing. You responded by expelling us. Now you want us back on the same terms? That is not happening. Either we are partners, or we are nothing. Cora looked ready to storm out. But Velthar raised a hand, stopping her. Let me see the full list of terms, he said. Tayrin sent the document to the delegation's tablets. Velthar read through it carefully. The demands were significant, but not unreasonable. Humans wanted equality, recognition, and authority over systems they managed. They wanted veto power over decisions that affected their personnel. They wanted guaranteed representation in council leadership. Most importantly, they wanted the right to say no. If the council asked for human help on a project, humans could decline without penalty. They would no longer be expected to solve every problem. These terms will be difficult to sell to the council, Velthar admitted. Many species will see them as giving humanity too much power. Then let those species maintain their own systems, Commander Jin replied. We are not asking for power over anyone else. We are asking for power over our own work and our own people. If that is too much, we will stay here in our own space and build our own civilization. We are doing fine without you. He gestured to the window, where New Sol gleamed below them. In 3 years, we have colonized 15 systems. We have established trade with 6 non-council species. We have developed new medical treatments, new energy systems, new transportation technology. We did all of this without council resources, without council markets, without council protection. We do not need you. But you need us. So the question is, what are you willing to do to make this partnership worth our time? The bluntness was shocking. But Velthar could not argue with it. He looked at his delegation. He nodded slightly, supporting the terms. Kratos looked thoughtful. Ventar seemed uncertain. Cora still looked angry, but she was thinking now, instead of just reacting. May I speak with my delegation privately? Velthar asked. Of course, Tayrin said. Take as much time as you need. We are not going anywhere. The human delegation left the room. The council representatives sat in uncomfortable silence for a moment. Finally, Cora spoke. This is humiliating. They are dictating terms like we are defeated enemies. We are defeated, he replied. Not by them, but by our own arrogance. They are simply acknowledging that reality. If we accept these terms, we are admitting we cannot function without them. We already cannot function without them, Velthar said. The only question is whether we admit it publicly or privately. If we reject their terms and go home, we still collapse. But at least we can tell ourselves we maintained our pride. Is that worth the millions who will die? Kratos leaned forward. Look at it strategically. Yes, these terms give humans significant power, but they also bind humans to council interests. Right now, they are independent and growing stronger. In 10 years, they might be powerful enough to challenge the council directly. But if we bring them back as partners, we align their interests with ours. We turn potential rivals into allies. That is pragmatic thinking, Ventar agreed. And economically, we need them desperately. Their trade networks, their logistics systems, their neutral mediation, all of it. Without them, our economy may never recover. Cora was silent for a long time. Finally, she sighed. I still hate this, but I cannot argue with the logic. We need them more than they need us. If these are the terms for getting them back, then we have no choice. They called the human delegation back. Velthar stood to deliver their response. "We accept your terms in principle," he said. "But I cannot commit the full council without their vote. I need to return to council space and present this agreement for ratification. That will take time." 1. "How much time?" Hana asked. "Months, probably. The debate will be intense. People are dying while you debate," Dr. Sung pointed out. "I know. But I cannot force the council to accept this. I can only present it and argue for it. Some species will agree immediately. Others will fight it. We need a majority to ratify any treaty." Tayrin considered this. "We will provide emergency humanitarian aid while you debate. Medical supplies, food shipments, technical advisors for critical infrastructure. Free of charge. Not because we owe you anything, but because people are suffering and we can help. But make no mistake that aid is temporary. Either you ratify this treaty, or you manage on your own." "That is fair," Velthar agreed. "More than fair, honestly." Before leaving, Velthar asked one more question. "When we expelled you, you left peacefully. You could have sabotaged systems, destroyed data, made things difficult. But you did not. Why?" Tayrin smiled slightly. "Because we are not petty. You made a decision we disagreed with. But it was your decision to make. We respected that, even though we knew you would regret it. Besides, we did not need revenge. We knew your own choice would teach you the lesson better than anything we could do. Did you know it would be this bad? We knew it would be bad. We did not know it would be this bad. We thought you would figure things out after a few months of difficulty. We underestimated how much of your civilization rested on foundations you never bothered to understand." Hana walked Velthar to the docking bay. As they waited for his shuttle, she spoke quietly. "I remember your speech during the expulsion vote. You said humans were too aggressive, too quick to interfere. Do you still believe that?" Velthar shook his head. "I never believed that. I voted against expulsion. But I was in the minority. The majority wanted you gone. And I lacked the influence to stop them. I am sorry for that. Do not apologize for other people's choices. Just learn from them. That is all anyone can do." The shuttle departed. Velthar watched New Soul fade into the distance, feeling the weight of what came next. He had to convince 53 species to swallow their pride and accept terms that acknowledged human superiority in countless areas. It would be the most difficult debate of his career. But as he thought about the collapsed economies, the spreading wars, the failing infrastructure, and the mounting death toll, he knew there was no alternative. Pride was expensive. The council could no longer afford it. Back on New Soul, Tayrin stood with Hana, watching the council shuttle depart. "Do you think they will ratify it?" Hana asked. "Eventually. They have no choice. And if they do not, then we continue building our own civilization. We will be fine either way." Hana smiled. "You have changed. 3 years ago, you cared deeply about the council. You wanted to make the partnership work. I still care, but I learned something important. You cannot force people to value you. You can only give them the space to realize your value themselves. If they choose to appreciate us, we can build something good together. If they do not, we move on. Either way, we will be fine." He looked up at the stars, where human ships patrolled and human colonies thrived. Humanity had been banished, but in that banishment, they had found something valuable. They had found self-reliance. They had found confidence. They had found the freedom to build a civilization on their own terms. Whether the council joined that civilization or not was ultimately up to them. Humanity had already made their choice. They had chosen to thrive, and their absence had spoken louder than words ever could.